Hi everyone, my name is George and welcome to the PNC podcast. I have with me Zach and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you from the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, Roland Wilson and Bianca Warnock.
Hi, nice
Hello.
to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for coming in today. We are very grateful. How are you both?
I'm very well, very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm great. Yeah, thank you for having us. I'm really happy to be here to talk to you.
So please tell us about your roles at the Bureau and what are your official job titles?
So my official job title is a program officer, but to make it simple to understand, I am a science communicator. So I like to translate science and I work with Australian farmers to help them understand the science behind climate change.
And my role at the Bureau, so I am the First Nations lead for the Bureau. So I help the Bureau work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities right across the continent. And I also do things like write the Bureau's Reconciliation Action Plan and help to communicate that with different parts of the Bureau and different people in the Bureau, but also the broader community as well, so that the Australian community knows what we are doing in terms of our part to achieve reconciliation in Australia.
When did you start working at the Bureau?
So I started working at the Bureau almost 3 years ago. So I started working at the Bureau in the National Security and Space Program, and I was there for 2 years. I was what's called Space Weather Engagement Lead at the Bureau, and I did that for 2 years, and then I decided I'd like to change roles, and then the role of the First Nations lead came up, and I applied for it, and I got the job, and so I've been in that role for since the start of 2024.
And I started at the start of 2024.
Cool. Who inspired you to take this career path?
I've worked in agricultural science for a long time, and climates are a big part of climate and farming and science. And so I've always hoped to be a science communicator, so any opportunity I get, I will chase. And when this opportunity came up, it was an extremely exciting chance because to work for the Bureau of Meteorology is a pretty prestigious opportunity, so it's a pretty good experience for me. So I really liked having that opportunity.
Do you know when you got this inspiration?
Science has been a big part of my life. I've always loved science. I was very lucky to have several science teachers in high school who were extremely passionate. I can still remember my year 10 chemistry teacher using a chair to dance around the room as an example of how molecules interact, and little things like that about helping people understand how things work. It was school that became my inspiration, definitely.
Well, what
for
idea?
me to come into my role, so the First Nations lead role. So before I was at the Bureau, I was working at Flinders University for a long time. So in my job there, so I was a lecturer at the university. So I was teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education and public health and medicine, and doing some research in the public health space as well. And after about 10 years in that, I decided that I needed a change, and a job came up at the Bureau, and I've come into the First Nations lead role because I've always wanted to work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. But I've also been a teacher as well for a very long time. So I used to be a high school teacher, and being a university lecturer, I love educating, and I love talking to people and helping them understand about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and the different things that affect them. And so when this role came up, I jumped at the opportunity because it's another way in which I can help a part of the government and different parts of the community understand Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities better, but also how the government can work better with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to make sure that they're safe as well.
Do you know what a typical day at work looks like?
So a typical day for work at me, so I work within kind of a small team of about 10 different people. at the bureau, but the bureau has just under 3,000 people working for it. But so my small team is about 10 people. So I get to work with different parts of the bureau every single day. So some days I might be working with Bianca, like today, coming out to a school and being able to talk to you about what we do. Some days, so like yesterday, for example, I got an email through from the bureau's media team so it was an inquiry about a community, so up in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. And so I worked with the media team to be able to respond to that inquiry. Some days I work with our learning and development team, so that's the teaching team. So we have to do our own learning in the bureau as well, and lots of different learning, across all different types of topics. And so sometimes I get to work with the learning and development team, and lots of other different parts of the bureau as well. Sometimes I work with the climate change people. Sometimes I work with the water people. My days can be really different depending on who needs me to do something.
So you don't have a set routine?
I do have a set routine because I have somebody who works for me as well. So I have to make sure that that they're on track with what they're doing. But I suppose the biggest part of my job this year has been about redesigning and working towards a new reconciliation action plan for the Bureau. So that's a really important document that helps the Bureau to understand what our responsibilities and commitments are to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, to make sure that the Bureau is helping those communities where we can, in terms of the work that the Bureau does. But also inside the Bureau, there's a lot of work that we need to do as well, to make some changes to make that happen. So that's another part of my job as well. So that reconciliation action plan has been a big part of my job this year, and then next year, all the different projects that are in that document, I get to start putting them into action. So, and working with lots of different parts of the Bureau to make that happen.
About the 3,000 people, do you think it's exactly 3,000 people work at the Bureau, or roughly?
I think it's about 2,873 from last time I looked at the number.
That's quite precise. My days are relatively typical at the moment. When I say that I do a lot of science communicating, sometimes I'm actually not just communicating science, but I'm communicating what we've done in the program. So say, for example, at the end of the year assembly, you will stand up and say, this year we had 10 assemblies, we had 15 students win an award, we read 20 books. Obviously those numbers aren't right, but you know what I mean. Sometimes I'm working on things like that, so writing a report or creating pictures that help explain how people interact with each other. And one thing I do is create information for the public, so sharing with them pictures that help describe the difference between weather versus forecast versus climate, for example, and creating tools to help people learn better.
We understand that you watched our video on Indigenous place names to the Bureau homepage. What did you think about our project?
I was very, very impressed. Firstly, your filming quality is wonderful and your speaking to camera is wonderful. But the passion and the drive that you've had and the effort that you went through to give context and information and background as to why this is important is extremely impressive. Remind me your ages.
I'm 10 and George is
9, turning 10 next December the 12th.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's
Slightly
so exciting.
older than me.
I know people who are nearly 6 times your age and still couldn't produce a video that good quality. So it's very, very impressive. And the information that you put in there as well was very direct, and I think that's so important in sending a message and asking people like us to pay attention. And we did, because it was so good.
Could you ever guess where we filmed that video?
I'm going to guess that if it wasn't on Saturn, it was here at the school, in the backyards of the school. Fabulous.
Well, it was like there was this. If you ever looked out when we were coming here, you would have saw there's this giant tree, We did it near there.
I did see that big giant tree. Yep. I'm very impressed with the garden around here. It's quite good.
And some of it was filmed in here as well. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realise that. Yeah,
That
yeah,
tra-
with the map.
Use the
yeah,
green
of
screen.
course. Mm.
When you first got our letter and video link, what did you do to send it to share it with other people?
So I was really blown away by the letter. So I got the letter in my inbox, and it was a very impressive letter because you identified the problem, you identified what needs to happen, and you identified the right people in the right organisation who could perhaps work to create the change, and your passion again was really, really clear in the letter, and it was a really clear, direct call to ask can we do this. So I was really impressed by a really direct letter asking for change, and a really important change.
For those listening who don't know the letter that we're talking about, I received a letter from Prospect North Primary School, a persuasive piece that very clearly outlined their interest in seeing more First Nations place names on the Bureau of Meteorology's websites and devices and products and tools. And we've come out today to speak to the students about how that happens and how the Bureau is working on achieving that, and how it's a very long process with a lot of people involved, and that we are definitely taking that on board, and we've already started making changes, and hopefully your letter propels that and makes it happen a lot faster, which is wonderful.
We know the Bureau has Indigenous weather knowledge online. How do you collect this information?
Yeah, so that's a really important piece of work that we're involved with, and the way in which that comes about is that so you've seen the website, and so local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities can contact the Bureau, and they can ask if we can help them develop a weather knowledge calendar with them. And so what we then do is we have a person inside the Bureau, an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person in the Bureau, who then works with the community, because different Indigenous groups across the continent have different knowledges and understandings of the weather and different experiences of the weather. And some groups have 6, 7, 8, 9 different seasons of the year. Some have 2 or 3, some have 8 or 9. And so we work with each group, each language group, each community group, to understand and to help them share the knowledge that they want to share with us. And so we collect that information, and we gather that information and work with the community to shape that information into a weather knowledge calendar. And we work with the community to design it as well, but we also have like a graphics team in the Bureau as well that helps to design that as well. So that's the process. And then the community, so that calendar then goes onto our website, but it also goes back to the community. The community can use their own weather knowledge calendar to help educate their young people as well, and pass on that information to their young people. And also we can have it on our website to share with the broader Australian community as well.
Yep. Do you know when the Bureau got an Indigenous person?
Oh, we've had Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people working with us for a long time. So I can't tell you when the first person was. It was probably many decades ago now.
How's the Bureau used Indigenous weather knowledge to help us understand Australia's weather better?
Well, that's a great question. So Indigenous weather knowledge is, like I said before, so it can be different for different groups. But one of the ways in which we are hoping to use the Indigenous weather knowledge, not just the calendars, but working with different communities, is understanding how weather and climate is changing over time. And some of a lot of your listeners would be aware of climate change and what that might involve. And how the climate is changing over time and the reasons for it. And one of the great things about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges is that we have tens of thousands of years of knowledge and experience in our communities, and understanding the landscape and understanding the weather, and how the weather has changed over time, and how the weather impacts the environment and how it impacts the community. And so using Indigenous weather knowledge and the systems that involves, we're able to start to see how different plants might be flowering at different times. We might be able to see how different animals are migrating at different times of the year. We might be able to see when the wet season and the dry season are starting and stopping, and how that's changing over time as well. So the dry season might be starting later than usual, or the wet season might be starting earlier than usual. And all of that knowledge helps us to paint a picture of how the climate might be changing. And so that's one way in which we're using Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges of the weather to help inform the work that the Bureau does, but also the broader Australian community as well.
So it varies?
A lot.
It does, yeah. Yeah, it can.
What is something that you enjoy about your job?
Speaking to people, speaking about different people. There's an important part of being interested in education and wanting people to learn, which is knowing that I'm still learning too. When you're a scientist, you don't know the answers to everything. In fact, that's what makes you a scientist, because you have found a problem and you want an answer. And if we already knew the answer, we would be a historian. But we're scientists, and so we want to research, we want to explore, which means we're curious. And to be curious means you want to learn about other people as well as other things. And so by helping other people learn, I'm learning through them as well. So I think that's one thing that I really love doing, and I get to come out and talk to cool kids like you guys. So what's not to love?
Really, I want to be a scientist, but what tips would you give anybody?
I'll jump on that one first. So you already are a scientist because you explore every day. How come that looks like that? Why is my food doing that when I've left it out for too long and it's gone dry or strange? You always are asking questions, so you already are a scientist. But to maintain that, keep asking questions. Keep asking why, or why not, or how come, or when, and look for answers. And don't give up. Don't give up. And the other thing is, you guys have got a little bit more schooling to get ahead of you. You might find that you're not the best in your class. You're not going to get the 100%, 10 out of 10 A student. I was never that student. But your passion and your interest motivate you, and you will find skills that suit you, that you can use to your best ability to make you the best scientist you need to be. So don't think that you need to be the best and the smartest to be a scientist. We all know things differently. It's not that you know more or you are better. We all know things differently to each other, and that's about that learning process.
What was the best advice you have ever received, and how has it guided you throughout your journey?
Question.
It's a really hard question.
Yeah, for my job.
It can be a person who inspires you too.
So a person who inspires me, has inspired me over my life is my grandmother. So and she's no longer with us, but my grandmother inspired me a lot because my grandmother lived a very hard life, traveling, right across the country, and she worked manual labour jobs her whole life. But she taught me the value of hard work, and just how hard it can be, in trying to make your way in the world. And so, her inspiration was about, working hard, trying to be a good person, and she encouraged me to go to school, and stay at school, to make sure that I got decent grades at school, and that and always wanted me to not just go to school, but always wanted me to go to university as well, which I did. Eventually, I was able to get into university. So, if there's one person who inspires me, it would be my grandma.
I love that. My grandmothers are very important to me as well. I think for me, one of the best pieces of advice that I was given, and it's going to sound a little confusing because trust me, I was very confused. My maths teacher in high school said, the stupidest question ever asked was the question stupid never asked. Basically, if you don't ask the question, you won't learn. And so that will make you feel stupid. But you're not stupid.
Oh, so when it means the stupid question, it means, say, if you never ask the question,
Then
it'd
it's
be more
stupid.
stupid.
Exactly. It's only stupid because you didn't ask it. So every time, when sometimes you're in class and someone goes, oh, this is maybe a stupid question, but no, they're asking the question, so it's not stupid, and therefore you are not stupid. So always ask, and that's a big part of being curious.
So hard work always pays off.
Yes, it does.
And asking questions.
And asking questions.
If you didn't work for the Bureau, what career path would you have followed?
Oh my God, that's so easy. I'd be on Broadway.
Oh, travel agent or something.
No, Broadway as in I'd sing, I'd be on musicals and performing for public in theatre.
I would be a high school teacher. I'd still be
Cool.
teaching science and humanities in high school.
What advice would you give us students if we wanted to work for the Bureau?
Well, there's lots of different jobs in the Bureau. So, Bianca and I, we're both scientists and both science trained, and we're both communicators as well. So, we're able to have the jobs that we have because of that. But there are and there's lots of different science jobs in the Bureau as well. So you can be a meteorologist, you could be a climatologist, you could be a hydrologist, which is somebody who works with water and water systems. You could be a space researcher and work in researching the sun and how the sun affects the Earth, for example. So there's lots of different science jobs in the Bureau. There's also lots of different other jobs in the Bureau as well. For administration jobs and human resource jobs. Managers, for
People
example.
who work on the computers and do the programming and
IT.
the language. Yep.
Computer
IT
science.
people. Yep.
Graphic designers.
Yep. We have a supercomputer.
So it depends what you're capable of.
It's your skill and your passion and your power that will put you in any place.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. It was such an honour meeting you both. Unfortunately, our time has run out, so we'd have to say goodbye. PNC podcast out.
Well done, guys.
Very good. First podcast. Well done. Very good.